name is Eric Lyde, and I just want to say thank you for everybody who has been reading the blog, tuning into the podcast. Your support has meant so much, and it has just been a really awesome couple weeks as we've been dealing with the coronavirus, but out of this, some really cool stuff has been born, and I just want to thank you for that. We have another great episode of Asking for a Friend coming up today. Savannah and Hayden are back, and we've got new questions, and we're going to dive in to that conversation in a little bit. It's a great conversation. You're really going to enjoy it. But first, if you haven't yet, be sure to go to leading-young.com. You can sign up there, and that'll notify every time we put out new content. So be sure to do that. That's leading-young.com. If you haven't followed us on Instagram and Twitter yet, be sure to do that. You can find us there at leading_young, and on Facebook, join that page. That is Leading Young Blog. And so please get on our social media, interact with us. We're having a ton of fun with this, and it's just really fun to see all the different ages of leaders and people that are coming together and are just learning together. So we're really excited for that. So without further ado, I want to send you over to our next episode of Asking for a Friend. Well, hello, Savannah and Hayden. So glad that you all are back for another week of Asking for a Friend here on Leading Young. I'm really looking forward. We got so many fan letters last week that we had to bring you two back. They were the people were demanding you all come back. So welcome back. Thank you for giving up some more time to talk with me and just go over some of these questions. How are you all hanging in there from coronavirus? Savannah, how is your quarantine going?
It's going great. I read 3 books. My house has been swept more times than I've ever swept any floor in my whole entire life. And yeah, that's about it. I don't know what day it is. Aside from that, everything's pretty going okay.
Yeah. I've done more dishes and cleaned my kitchen. Like I do it twice a day, I think now.
I'm willingly doing yard work. Like I went outside and picked up sticks today. That, it's bad. Stop picking up sticks.
It's desperate times. Desperate times. Hayden, how about you? How is quarantine 2020 treating you?
It's going great. I mean, I actually like yard work, but like same with you, like dishes, you don't know how many dishes you actually get dirty when you cook at home.
Yeah.
You're not getting to eat out all the time. It's just constantly that dishwasher is full.
Yeah, our water bill was up like $35 this month from all the laundry and dishwasher usage. And our daughter takes baths in a Whirlpool tub now because she thinks it's a swimming pool. That's very costly as well, but I'm blaming it on the laundry and
it's crazy how many clothes we wear when we're stuck at home. We can't change, but yet the clothes still pile up too.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. This is day 3 for me. This hoodie, day 3. So I'm trying to cut down.
Nice.
My water bill went up, but I think it's because I have been doing so many DIY bleaching clothes projects, and I don't have a washer here. Like I have to go to my mom's. So I've been like hand washing clothes in the bathtub, and that costs a lot of money when you do it 4 times a week.
That is a lot. Well, hopefully everyone out there is surviving your quarantine as well, and maybe today will bring you a smile, a little joy, or at least something to listen to while you're sitting at home or wherever you're at. So we're going to jump right in. If you didn't join us last week, be sure to go back and check out last week's episode. We had a great conversation on a lot of different topics, so be sure to check that out. This week, we've got more questions that have been sent in, and so we're really looking forward to that. Remember, if you want to send in questions, you can do that at leadingyoungblog@gmail.com. So be sure to send in any questions that come to your mind while we're talking or while you're listening. But this week, one of the questions that was sent in is basically just coming off our quick little quarantine talk. Basically, during this time, how are you balancing trust, control, and laziness? How are you balancing trust, control, and laziness during this time? Hayden, you want to start?
Sure. And this is one of those if you listened last week, one of those deep questions that I like to ask, because a lot of the time in our walk, those are 3 things that are hard to balance anytime. And now you throw in pandemic, it's even harder to balance them. So personally, it's what I in meditation, I got to think even harder about those things. Am I actually being lazy? Am I sitting on the couch doing nothing? Is that considered trust? Am I trusting God that's going to provide for all my needs, put food on the table, pay my bills? Or, am I so, you know, holding on to everything that I'm controlling the situation? So me and my wife maybe have different views on this, what we consider being lazy or being trustful, but we're working on it. And I don't have a straight answer for you for that question. Yeah, I think it's an individual question that each person needs to ask themselves, and it's different in everybody's eyes.
How about you, Sav? You said you've been getting out in the yard, so maybe you haven't been lazy, but how are you doing with the trust and control thing?
I would say like we kind of talked about the Enneagram a little bit last week.
Yeah.
I'm a 3, so I like to be able to like make a list and achieve it and get it done. So I think the laziness part I haven't been doing. Like one of my friends was making fun of me because the first day that we got quarantined, I made this long list of all these things I wanted to do during quarantine. And I blew through it in like a week because I just wanted to get it done. But so I'm not really struggling with the laziness part, like trying to stick to the schedule and stuff. I would say the hardest part is the control part. Like talked about last week, I'm a teacher, so I'm a planner by trade and by nature, just who I am. And so that has been super hard for me, like not being able to control exactly what's going to happen or not know what's going to happen, have any say in what's going to happen in the future or what my plans are. Like at this point, you should not be making plans for anywhere in the near future because they're probably not going to happen. So that's probably been the toughest one for me. And like this summer, I'm 22, 23. I just turned 23. So a lot of my friends are getting married, and I have like 6 weddings to go to this summer. And just like the thought of it gives me anxiety to think about like those might get canceled, or just all of those types of things. So the control part's super hard for me. The trust part, though, I think I have a good sense of understanding that like this will end, even though it feels like it's never going to end right now. That there will be a day. I feel like we're in like an apocalyptic movie. There will be a day. There will come a time. Whenever like we can go into the grocery store freely, or whenever we can hug each other, or not have to do this, where we can be in the same room as each other. So I think the trusting that everything's gonna be okay is not hard for me, but the control part is like I'm struggling with that part, like not being able to plan for what I'm gonna do or what's gonna happen, or not really having any say in it at all. So
Yeah, I found for me the uh, laziness, like fighting laziness, has definitely been. I'm usually not a very hard person to get motivated or motivated to do something, but since this all has happened, I have had many moments of where I'm just like, I just don't want to do anything, and I think it's because of that, because we don't really have control anymore, really, of even our own schedule. Like everything that normally I would do to plan for an upcoming weekend or to plan for summer stuff and whatever, it, because it is all so unknown right now, it's so hard to be motivated to do anything, because as soon as you work on something, the next day they're like, oh yeah, by the way, we're doing this for another month. So it's just, it's a lot of frustration, I think, for me in that aspect. As somebody who is, I am speaking of the Enneagram, so I am a 7. And so this is just a terrible world for the 7 to live in, because like we have nothing to look forward to right now. We have, I mean, the end of this, but like there's no clear date for us to set and look forward to. We can't see people. We can't, it's just, it's been a rough couple weeks, but I'm transitioning. I am curious, because I found this, especially maybe a little less now, maybe even more now. Do you guys find it difficult to trust that God has a plan for all of this? Not suggesting that God has, instrumented all of this happening, but do you trust that God has a plan to come out of all this?
Absolutely. I do. And that's I looked up a verse for this, and it's a verse that most of us know, but it's in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15 through 17. It says, "So be careful how you live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. Make the most of every opportunity in these evil days." And I think I'm trusting God in this situation, and there's something big going to come out of this. I don't know what it is, but if we're supposed to make the most of every opportunity, we need to look at this situation, this pandemic, not as a pandemic, but what is the opportunity behind this? What is uh, the role that this is going to play in the global church? And I think it's going to be absolutely huge, personally, and I'm excited to see what comes from it. You know, we're holding on now, but I'm trusting that huge things are going to happen in this church and in this town and in the state and in the country, and I'm looking forward to it, honestly.
I think too, like we kind of talked about a little bit, we don't really know when this is going to end right now, but I think it's kind of a testimony to how God works, of how like we might pray for something and it doesn't happen instantly, so we think He's not answering our prayers. But I think of it like right now, this sucks, like being stuck in our houses all the time. But I think when it's over, like the joy and the thankfulness that will come to people of being able to be together in all settings, but like in church will be a silver lining and something that I think people may start to take more seriously, that they have the opportunity to leave their house. And so it'll be more exciting for them to go to church and that sort of thing. And also, Eric, me and you kind of talked about a little bit how even though these Zoom calls, like I want nothing more than to be in the same room with people, they are kind of neat in the fact that I feel like people are like almost more engaged. And I've talked to a couple of people about it. I don't know if it's like the thing that everyone says, it's easier to say what you feel behind a screen, or if it's just because it's like this new and exciting way to communicate. But I think like our YAM group, our young adult group, has had like some of the highest numbers it's ever had in attendance, and our all of our YouTube videos that are going up, like they're getting really good amounts of views. And so I think like it's it's kind of easy to see where personally this sucks, and it's like why is this happening? But when you take, it's kind of like a perspective thing. Like when you step back and you think to yourself, okay, are there good things coming out of this? There are. They just, we still just want to be like together in person, but there are still good things that are happening. And I can't remember if I talked about this in here in the podcast last week or if it was in my rooted group, but we talked about, I said how like just for me personally, I kind of prayed at the beginning of the year that I would just chill out, like because I'm a 3, so I like to just get things done, and I like to always be doing something. And I was praying about like I wish I could just chill out. Like I wish I could not care so much about getting things done all the time. And if there's like one thing that this quarantine has taught me, because like I said, I live at home. Like I don't have siblings here or parents or like a spouse or boyfriend or anything. Like just me, so I'm just chilling by myself. But I've like started doing things that I don't have time to do that normally that I really enjoy. Like I said, I've read some books. I've been painting too many things, but I really like to paint. And it's just something I never give myself time for. And like really reading my Bible a lot more too. Like whenever you sent out the questions for YAM, I was like, ooh, I'm going to read all about this and figure out everything I can figure out about it because I have nothing else to do. So I think there are definitely some silver linings, and like trusting that something good will come out of this. I do, but I also believe that good things are already coming out of it. And it's almost like a perspective thing. Like, how are you going to look at the situation? Like half empty or half full, you know?
Yeah, that's all good stuff on that. And so hopefully, if you're listening, watching this, you are finding ways to balance all of those things, regardless whether, like Hayden said, whether it's a pandemic going on or not. These are all 3 big things to balance on their own, anyways, despite being in the middle of a global pandemic. But we all have a lot more time for reflection right now, and for like you said, time to do things that we normally wouldn't have time to do or wouldn't take the time to do. So hopefully you're finding those things and you're doing those things. So all good points on that. All right, I want to move on to our next question. And this question comes right from the Bible. So we're going to be in 1 Timothy chapter 2 in verses 11 through 15. 1 Timothy chapter 2, 11 through 15. And Savannah, if you're there, well, I'm going to let you read this, and then I know that you are passionate about this specific section of Scripture, so I'm going to let you read it, and then I'm going to let you kind of go into answering it.
Okay. Okay, 11 through 15, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. It says, a woman should learn in quietness and full submission. I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man. She must be quiet. For Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not the one deceived. It was the woman who was deceived and became a sinner. But women will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with propriety.
All right, so Sav, what you just read, what does that mean for women in ministry? What can they have a lead role in ministry?
Okay, so when I first read this one, when you posted it in our Facebook group, I just like I read it and I was like, okay, like I have never actually read this verse before. I've just kind of heard people talk about it. I'll just be honest, I haven't. And so I knew that there was something in the Bible that said something about women shouldn't lead the church. But when I read this verse, I was like, oh my goodness, like this straight up says I should not teach. And so I was just flipping through my Bible. I was like, I gotta find somewhere where it says women are allowed to talk because I cannot live this way. So I couldn't find anything in my Bible. So I called one of my friends that has a really good study Bible. And she was telling me basically, she prefaced with this, she said, you should never read your Bible without some sort of historical context because you'll get really confused and you won't. Like you need to be able to compare it to history and like the time around it or whatever. So basically what was happening in this time is Timothy was planting a church. And so Paul is writing this letter specifically to Timothy. And it's like not to, it is, I mean, I want to say it's not to Christians, but it's like not like this mass letter for everyone to read and follow when they plant their church. It's a letter written to Timothy for him where he's planting his church. And so at that time, the Ephesian women that were around there, they were cult leaders. And so whenever they were like converting to Christianity, they went from being these cult leaders who were teaching the cult ways and they became Christian women. They were like, okay, well, I was a teacher over here, so I need to teach this too. And basically what Paul is saying is, Timothy, these women are crazy. Don't let these Ephesian women teach. And he's saying that the men have been into Christianity for longer, so they just inherently know more. And so let them teach. Don't let the women teach over these Ephesian women teach over them because they're going to teach. It's kind of like if you think about if you had got baptized, saved, whatever, and then the very next day you were like, okay, let me go on stage and preach about all the good things I know about Jesus. Like you might have good intent and come from a good heart condition, I guess, I don't know. But like you just wouldn't have the knowledge that you need to preach to all these other people, if that makes sense. So basically that's what's happening here. And he's saying like, I wouldn't permit women to teach, but he's talking about Ephesian women in that time because of the situation that was going on. And so there's also a lot of other times in the Bible where women do lead and they do teach. And there's even a Bible verse, I think it's in Titus, where he says, I read it and I was like, hallelujah. It says women should teach. I was like, yes, yes we should. So yeah, I'm very relieved to have the historical context and know that it is not true that I have to stay quiet and not talk and only study all the time. So that's just what I got from that. But so yeah. That's like
I can only imagine you living in a world where you have to stay quiet. Like that would be.
I was sitting literally right here when I read the Bible verse, and I read it and I was like, "What am I gonna do?
Yeah.
What's happening? Quarantine in this? What?"
Yeah, things are going downhill quick. Hayden, you got any thoughts with that?
Yeah. Well, when I went back and reread it, of course, and that's one thing that I've heard a lot in my life. But before I attended here, I actually attended a church that was pretty much led by just women. And, she's saying take it in context. Well, that's everything in Scripture. You have to read it within the context. And I think it's a great representation right now, this quarantine. Not everybody's sick, but, we're going to stay home until everybody's healthy. And I think that's what he's saying in the scripture there, it's like, hey, some of these women are sick. They're not saying the right things. So we need to quarantine all these people until they're healthy, until they know what they're actually going to say and can say it properly, until they can come back out and spread it. So I don't think it's saying women shouldn't preach, because God puts things on everybody's hearts, and he wouldn't put something on your heart if you're not supposed to say it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, um, like any type of leadership, I think we would be sorely mistaken, and we would be shortchanging not only ourselves, but any group of people we are leading, if we don't take into account all the different voices, A, of the people we're leading, but B, of the people that could pour into, whether it's your business, your ministry, whatever it is. If we discount a voice because of gender, race, whatever, then we are really shortchanging ourselves and a lot of other people. And so, I mean, we could spend hours going through the Bible of all the, influential women that God put in the Bible that led in many different ways, or stepped up in big times when men sometimes wouldn't. And so, um, I think it's really important to take in many different voices, and to allow all voices to speak. And now, like Paul's saying, though, like in anything, we just need to watch who we're listening to, right? And be careful of what we're taking in. And so, in this case, it was women that were kind of doing the craziness, but in many other cases in the Bible, we see that it was, men doing it. And in that case, they probably said the same thing about them. And so, um, it's such an important, when you're reading your Bible, anything, we have to remember that the Bible is as much a history book as it is anything. And there's a lot of background context that goes with everything that's in this, that is so important to understand when we're reading it and when we're taking it in, because, um, something like that verse, not understanding the context, can very easily be taken out of context. And quite honestly, it's been taken out of context many times. And so, to me, that verse is as much of a lesson on anything, that it's so important to understand. If you don't have a study Bible, gosh, spend the 30, 40, 50 bucks, whatever they are, to get one, because it is, um, I know I understand so much more because of mine than what I did before that. So, and of course, now with the internet, there's a ton of great resources on there. But so, Sav, thank you for doing your research on that, and we're glad that you get to continue to speak on this podcast, because I thought I might have to mute. I thought I might have to mute you after that verse, but
She was shook.
sounds
I was
like
scared. I was scared. I really was. I was like, I don't want to go against the Lord, but I just got a lot to say.
so. Yeah, good stuff on that. Thank you, Sav, for researching that. All right, let's go to our last question, and our last question is basically this. It is based around this idea of how we handle and give forgiveness. I've talked with several different young adults have had this same mindset. I don't think it's necessarily just a mindset that comes from young adults, but I just, because of um, that demographic, they are often much more focused on this than maybe other groups are. But what do you say to the statement of the church is not good at forgiving, and the church does a lot of handpicking of who gets forgiveness for this and who doesn't get forgiveness for that? Would you agree with that? Disagree with that? Hayden, you want to start?
I would say, sadly, on a global scale, I would say that comment is probably correct, that the church doesn't forgive as well as they should. I feel like they pick and choose what they forgive and what they don't forgive in situations. And person to person or church to church, though, that varies drastically. You know, it's just an open-ended question that it's
Yeah.
hard to speak on, because if you want to speak on a global church, yeah, we're not good at it. If you want to speak on an individual church, I'd have to talk to the church directly
Yeah.
or look at the church directly. But I would say, yeah, we don't forgive as much as we should forgive.
What do you think, Sav?
I would agree. I don't think I think it's confusing too when we say the church. Like we kind of talked about this a little bit again, but like, what is the church? Is it our church, or is it global church, or like technically the church is its people, like however you want to see it. But I think more so we do a bad job of understanding that forgiveness is not something that you give once and expect things to get better. Like sometimes you have to forgive and forget something like more than once for someone, because that's what Jesus would do. So I think sometimes we do a bad job of that, on a global scale, on a like all around, like not speaking badly about our church or anything. I just think in general people do a bad job of that, of having it in their head that someone can mess up too many times, and that's like just not true.
Is there a line between forgiveness and enabling in your mind?
I don't think that there is. I think that you should help people no matter what. And I think there is such thing as helping them in a way that's hurtful to them. But I think that as a job as a Christian, it's your job to find a different way to help them that's not hurtful to them.
Yeah. I may take the other stance on this, and it may conflict with what I said, last week's podcast on the plank in my eye. Enabling, that's the last thing we want to do. I mean, a lot of the times we don't throw discipline into love, but there is discipline in love. I was raised in a house that had lots of discipline, and my parents didn't love me any less. They maybe loved me even more. So, I mean, I'm not saying that we're the disciplinaries, but I am saying that there has to be a step, after the forgiveness to achieve something better. If that makes sense.
I agree with that. I do think like you don't want to just forgive someone and be like, okay, it's fine, you did that. But I just think in the sense of like, if you have, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. I just don't think you should ever turn away from someone or turn someone away from something that they need, even if you know that they're abusing it. Like if it's something that they need, it's something that they need. And we kind of talked about it in Yam about how, you see a homeless person, do you give them money even though they're just gonna, it's, well, I don't want to stereotype, but even though you just know they're gonna spend on alcohol, like I don't think you should do that. But if you know they don't have food, get them food. Like you don't have to enable them with the money, but you can still help meet the need that they need. And so I don't know. I get frustrated because in my mind, from my perspective, or my opinion, whatever you call it, I just don't think that God would, or Jesus, God would ever like not help someone. He would never turn away from someone that he knows is struggling, no matter, even if he knows the outcome of it's not going to be good. He's not going to not give them something they need, I don't think.
Yeah. And I personally, for me anyways, I feel like forgiveness is like a two-tiered word, as in it's easy for me to forgive somebody in my mind, but it's a lot harder for me to forgive them in my heart. And, I can act like I have forgiven you, no problem whatsoever. But, 5 years down the road, I see you walking across the street and I was like, oh, this person did that to me that one time. Like, I don't forget. And that's not in my brain. That's in my heart, because it scarred me. So the forgiveness is such a hard topic to talk about as well, because there's so many layers to it. And it
I think
depends on
there's
how deep you want to dive into it.
I think there's like so many different kinds of forgiveness too. Like I think this question is confusing because personal forgiveness, like what Hayden's talking about, like when someone hurts you, I think is a lot harder. And it honestly is harder for me to continue to give to someone that has hurt me. But like I think it's important that I should do that or try to do that. But then there's also forgiveness of like strangers, of like we talked about, like homeless people. Like, we don't know them, but we know that they need help and that they're not like where they need to be. Or people that come to the, I don't know, there's just different types of forgiveness. Like, there's forgiveness on the personal level, and then this like forgiveness for a sin that was not personal to you, but you know someone dealt with. Like, can you look past that sin and still help that person? Like, and that's,
I think it's interesting too. And I think one of the areas, and I think maybe where the church kind of gets the reputation for struggling with this whole idea of kind of who gets forgiveness for this and who doesn't, who do we put on the bad list. But I think part of the reason is a misunderstanding uh, from Christians themselves of we can't hold people to a lifestyle that they haven't chosen to live. Like we can't hold non-Christian people to Christian values if they're not a Christian, right? It would make no sense for them to follow those if they haven't chosen to yet. And so I think in that scenario, what we have to think can maybe it's less about forgiveness. It's more of how do I be an example of Jesus to this person? Now I think things change maybe a little bit when we talk about somebody that is a Christian. Then it kind of comes to that whole plank in your eye conversation we had of how do I kind of hold this person accountable? But we can't hold a person accountable for something they don't believe in. And I think we get, as Christians, we get caught up in that. Oh, well, they shouldn't be doing that, and they are bad people for doing this, or they are off doing that. And it's, well, they're not, like, they don't believe what we believe. And so how can we hold them to that standard when that's not the standard they're holding themselves to yet? And so I don't know, that's kind of a spot of where I think the church, we don't always fully understand that or want to accept that. And then that gets us into kind of a judgmental attitude in a way, and maybe a lack of forgiveness. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I agree with that. And I think sometimes we will judge the person based on our own morals and what we think is right, and then in turn don't give them the grace and love that we should, because we don't see them acting how we think they should act. And that's where I get like kind of frustrated. Like, Jesus, he ate with sinners, and he loved us all the same, no matter what moral code we hold ourselves to. Like, he still cares about us and still wants to love us and treat, and so we should do that to other people too.
Yeah, and I'm going to kind of go down a different road with this, but Sav just a minute ago mentioned like a homeless person that, if you were to give them money, they would go spend it on something else. And generally, like, we associate the word poverty with money, but it has nothing to do with money. And in my situation, or a lot of people's situation, our poverty is forgiveness. We have a lack of forgiveness, which becomes our poverty. So, as a church, like what she was saying, like, people aren't perfect, and we know that. We know we're not going to be perfect. We can't be perfect. But going back to what you said, Eric, it's the heart of the person. If they want forgiveness and they're going to try to stop what they're doing, then by all means, they're going to get that forgiveness for God. They should get it from us as well.
Yeah, and I don't know, and I say this a lot about a lot of different things, but I often think like, and I could be way off on this, but I just can't imagine that when the time comes, I get to heaven, that, God's gonna say, hey, remember that time that, you threw that homeless guy a $5? Well, he went and bought alcohol, and I'm going to hold that against you. I don't know. I just don't think those are the type of conversations that we're going to have. It's going to be more of, what did you do to represent me, and how many people did you bring with you, and teach them to represent me in a proper way. And I think another thing we have to remember too is, and Savannah kind of alluded to this, we have to remember that when we say the church, we're not talking about organizations or buildings. We're talking about us, right? And so a lot of times we'll say the church is bad at this or the church doesn't do this enough. Well, we put a lot of pressure on the church as an organization to carry out a lot of these missions. And it's not always, as the organization, they can't carry out every one of these missions. It's just not possible. But that's where the church, us, steps in. That's where we are the ones that carry this out. Some people might say, well, I get mad because, they don't feed enough people. Well, maybe they're feeding as many as they can with the money that the church has given. Or, I wish that they would do more of this or would do more of that. Well, it's really not up to them, right? Because as an organization, you can only work within the constraints of your resources and the limitations you have to set to be an organization that lasts. And so I think sometimes we like to throw blame on the church as a building, as an organization, but really we need to kind of turn that around and look at it as ourselves, as Christians, as, hey, it's not their responsibility to carry out everything I think should happen. It's time for me to step up and carry out this mission. And hopefully, if they can come alongside me, they will. But it's not my job to wait for them to act. I should act, and they will probably come alongside me.
Yeah, I watched this video, and it was all about how it was like what it was called, like what the church can do better. I don't remember where it was at, but it was kind of talking about that, about how so they asked members of this church, a church made it, and they asked members of the church, what could we do better? And they were like, oh, I wish we would serve more people in the food pantry. And so they said, okay, we could do that. Can you find time in your schedule to help us prepare meals? I'm like, oh, no, I'm too busy. And then they would say, like, we need better children's programs. Well, could you help us work together to make a better, to put together a program? Like, well, I have a lot going on. Like, when you see a problem in the church, like, you're the church, fix the problem. Like, do what you need to do. And if you can't complain about something if you're not going to help make it better, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Hayden, any thoughts with that?
Yeah, just sitting here listening to that. I'm a big believer in not doing TOB, which is transfer of blame, and that's connecting perfectly with the plank in our eyes that we were talking about last week. But also, I think that goes back to question one. What Sab was saying is, if you're not, if you're wanting something done, you better get it done. Like, why don't you step in and fill that role? Well, then that becomes back to the first question: is, am I trusting, am I being lazy, or am I controlling the situation? And it's the scripture is so beautiful because it's all perfectly woven together that makes you dive deeper. So even if I am reading on forgiveness or studying on forgiveness, it'll lead to maybe an answer for the first question, or then lead to, okay, what about women in ministry? It's just awesome that we have the book that gives us all the answers if you want to find them.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to kind of end with this concept because I do think that as Christians, it's definitely this idea of forgiveness. It is kind of a mindset thing, and it is something that we don't do very well all the time. So how do we, in your guys' minds, begin to shift that mindset? What has to happen, maybe internally or externally, for us to be able to shift that mindset?
I guess personally, it starts. I mean, a lot of the time, I don't forgive myself very easy. I hold myself to maybe a higher standard than other people, which I don't know if that's biblical or not. So if I can forgive myself more, then I can learn to forgive other people more. And then honestly get to the point where they don't even have to ask for forgiveness. They just know that if they're going to make a change, or if that they're willing to do something different, that it's already forgiven.
I think for me, and I tell my senior girls this all the time, like, at the end of the day, the decisions you make and the things you do and the things you let influence you, when you're thinking about them, I always think, okay, there are two options here. I can either let God win or I can let Satan win. And when you put it that black and white, it's like, okay, are you really gonna let Satan win? Are you really gonna let like Satan hold you back from forgiving this person and not letting like what God has planned for you, which you know, like in your heart, you know that's gonna be the better option. Like, are you gonna let him hold you back from that? And so for me, like, I'm not saying I'm the best forgiver ever, but I think I do I don't struggle too bad with like letting things go. Like, things will upset me, but I'm like, okay, I don't want to be upset about this because I don't want this to stop from whatever God has planned for me. And so I think when you just look at the black, it gets easier when you just look at the black and white of it. Like, it's either Satan or God. Which one are you going to let choose how you move forward?
Yeah, and I think when we really, it boils down to the idea. We look at, we're coming up on Easter, and we look at what Jesus did on the cross. That's the ultimate act of forgiveness to the most extreme. It cost him his life for all of us. And so, a lot of the debates that, whether within the church or between the church and other groups of people, it really comes down to, what Jesus wanted to make sure that we were forgiven so much and had mercy and had this grace so much that he went to a cross and died for every single one of us. And so at times when I kind of get hung up on some things, I think, that's just, I kind of go back to that. I think, it's not really my place maybe. And it's not what God wanted. God wanted me to focus on going and making disciples and baptizing them. And so, I think sometimes it's just easy to get off mission on some of these questions and topic, and who gets forgiveness is often one of them for the church and for Christians. So thank you all for joining me once again for another episode of Asking for a Friend on Leading Young. I really appreciate you all taking time out of your busy schedules right now to do this
You want to knock
podcast
out
again.
next week's right now too? I mean, I'm
Yeah, we
free.
could just
record straight through.
we'll just keep going, just keep talking. I'm sure the people listening would love to just hear the conversations we have when we're
Hi,
not
Mom.
recording. That would be so. But yeah, well, we appreciate you again. You can find us at leading-young.com. We're on social media at leading_young on Instagram and Twitter, and you can find us on Facebook at Leading Young Blog. So be sure to check those out, subscribe. This will be on YouTube, and we are now officially on all major podcast platforms. So this is coming to you in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and more. So wherever you get your podcast, you should be able to find us there now. So we're looking forward to bringing you more content from Leading Young. And that being said, Savannah, Hayden, thank you for joining me again. This has been another episode of Leading Young. Leading Young is by young leaders